final MIAA Top 25 Reveal Show presented by Gold Athletics. I'm your host, John Serenitas. And as always, I'm joined by my partners, Tyler Amaral and Adam Kirchen. Gentlemen, how are you doing this evening?
Doing great. Doing great. How are you?
Good, good. I mean, it's hard to believe that this is technically our last high school show of the 2024 season. And while, yes, we didn't give you advance notice that we were doing this, this show was supposed to air last night. Unfortunately, we had to move it around. It's airing tonight, so it doesn't matter. You can feel free to jump on and watch it now or watch it at your own convenience. But nonetheless, we are here and we are excited to present our final top 25 MIAA poll for this season. And before we do that, I do want to remind you that Gold Athletics is your one-stop shop for fundraising. They have recently expanded into Maine and New Hampshire with Blaze and Jeff Whitman. They are ready to support even more programs across New England. Whether you're in football or any other sport, reach out to Gold Athletics, and they'll make sure your program raises the money. All right, gentlemen. So I'm pretty excited about this. And as you can see, we've shared our PowerPoint presentation here. Yes, we're pretty newfangled with the technology here. We've shared our PowerPoint presentation here. What we're going to do is Adam's going to go through his thought process here with this final top 25 poll. This is a collaborative approach. Adam runs the poll. This is his poll, but we talk about it. He doesn't just put it out there. We have a lot of conversations between the three of us on a week-to-week basis as to the poll and what Adam puts out there as a final poll. So this isn't draconian. This isn't Adam saying, F you guys, this is what I'm going to put out there. This is my opinion. And I will tell you this. We had a lot of conversation about this final poll. There was a lot of back and forth. But ultimately, what makes New England Football Journal work is that not only are we knowledgeable in terms of high school football in Massachusetts, but we respect each other's opinions and our knowledge. And I think that what you'll find is this is as accurate a poll as you will find in the state. Now, before we get started and we get into the top 25 itself, we're going to take a look at the first 15 out. And Adam, just some thoughts here in alphabetical order. I want to hear from both of you here in terms of the thought process on these first 15 out. It's 40 teams, correct? But these are the 15 that just missed the cut.
Yeah, that's how we do the whole poll from the start of the season till the very end. Usually at the end of the season, I like to prioritize teams that made the state semifinals or Final Four, as you may be. So, like, you know, some of these teams didn't. Like, I don't think Bishop Feehan made it, but they had a really good season. A team like Mashpee was in the Division 7, state final. So that got them here into the 15 out. And it's tougher for a smaller school to enter the final top 25. But a lot of these teams did well. Like Walpole is 6-6. So you would think they wouldn't get in, but they played a really tough schedule, made it to the Division 3 Final Four state semifinal. Teams like Reading would have been in the top 25, but they had such a lopsided loss to Stoneham at the end of the season that we wanted to get Stoneham in there and Reading in there on the same 15 out. Randolph, another 15 out team, had a really good season but lost to West Boylston. Teams like Old Rochester played well. Like a team like Dartmouth did not make the state semifinal, but they had a really good season, and they played really well. Teams like Clinton made it to the state semifinals. Northbridge had a good year, and Canton I thought they didn't make the Final Four, but they darn near beat Duxbury in the playoffs. And they also have one of the few losses to North Attleboro. Canton was, just a really solid team all year long. I think they had 4 losses, but they had a good season, and we wanted to include them again. The Hockomock Davenport had a resurgence this year. Not that it isn't always good, but it for Canton to be in there, it speaks to how good the Davenport was, and it speaks to how good their season was. We look at how good that North Attleboro team was. and Canton beat them. So I thought that these are all really good teams and all had really good tournament success.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing here is the tournament success. Like Bishop Fino was pretty steady throughout the regular season, lost early to Zavarian, then they rattled off some nice wins, won around in the playoffs, and then fell to a very good Wellesley team. So Fino had a nice year. You mentioned Canton. I think Canton was a really interesting story this year. They kind of made the Davenport a 4-horse race rather than the 3-horse race that everyone expected with North Mansfield and Foxborough. So Canton had a very good year in a very difficult league. I saw Clinton. Clinton's a team to keep an eye on for next year. They're going up from Division 7 to Division 6, but they have 20-something juniors on their roster. A lot of those juniors are playing two ways, so they're a team to watch out, a team to look out for next year. Just some other thoughts here. Linfield, I saw them in the D6 quarterfinals. They're probably the third best team in Division 6. I think Fairhaven and Hudson were the top two, and that played out that way in the bracket. But Linfield took Fairhaven to overtime. Quarterback Tyler Adamo, one of the better quarterbacks, better playmakers I saw all year. Norwell's another team I saw. I thought sophomore quarterback Jack Lucarelli was really impressive. They nearly upset Hudson in the state semifinals. That was a kind of a tight game. They held Jake Attaway to under 50 yards passing. So Norwell had a very good year as well. But I think, again, Walpole's an interesting case here. I think Walpole and Bill Ricker were the two teams throughout the year that we really had no idea what to do with. They looked like they could beat anyone one week. Next week, they could lose to anyone. So they're kind of Jekyll and Hyde, both of those teams. But I think ultimately Walpole probably does deserve to be here based on the strength of schedule and making it to the D3 semifinals again.
All right. So without further ado, we are going to move forward. And we're going to start with the teams that ultimately fell in the 25 to 21 range. And we're going to start with the 25th team in our final top 25 poll of the 2024 season, Todd Kiley's Franklin Panthers, who finished 7-4.
I was really impressed with what they brought to the table this year. They didn't that one of their losses was to a team a couple spots up, Central Catholic. But, I mean, John, they played KP very tough on Thanksgiving, and I think that means a lot given how good KP is. Todd Kiley's done a great job. I think the future is bright with him in charge of Franklin. I think, next year they'll be fun to watch again. But again, that lineman, Julian Rampino, a great player on all over the defensive line, really. And so Franklin had a good year. They didn't win the Kelly Rex, but they threw a scare into King Philip in a year that many people didn't think that was going to happen. So I was impressed with Franklin. I think they're going to be good going forward. Todd Kiley's a great coach, and it'll be interesting to see what he does there.
Yeah, Franklin had a nice season. Started off a little slow, but I think they're one of these teams that got better throughout the season in Todd Kiley's first year at the program. We know that they're going to be in the mix. They're going to be a perennial top 25 team under Todd Kiley. A lot of athletes in that school. It's a big school. They have a great coach, and they have a nice culture there going from Ian Bain now to Todd Kiley. So I think good things are on the horizon here for Franklin football. This was just kind of the start of it, I think. Will Terrell had a breakout year. Franklin definitely deserves to be here in the top 25.
All right, next up at number 24, a team that I think a lot of people didn't know what to make of at the beginning of the year, but Jesse Davis got a lot out of them as the year went on. They ended up being one win away from getting to a Super Bowl, losing to Catholic Memorial in the semifinal round. Wellesley is the 24th ranked team in our final top 25 MIAA top 25 poll.
I liked Wellesley a lot this year. I was going to rank them preseason, but we had already a lot of Bay State Conference teams, so I was just going to sort of wait and see. But a lot of the Bay State coaches said that Wellesley was going to be good this year. I guess I didn't really see it until it started happening, and they really were tough. Lucas Prock, I think is his name, is the quarterback, a sophomore quarterback for Wellesley who had a great season. And they're really excited about what he can do there. And so it'll be interesting. Wellesley, came close against a lot of teams and really it beat some good ones too. So I thought they played well against the competition they play. I mean, look, Catholic Memorial got the better of them. Again, that happens to a lot of teams. I think Wellesley really played well this year and lived up to their reputation. It was a good year for them.
Yeah, I think Jesse Davis did an outstanding job with the program this year. I think going into the year, everyone expected the top three to be CM, KP, and Marshfield. Who would that fourth team be to emerge and make it to the semifinals? A lot of people said Bishop Feehan. A lot of people said Barnstable. Not as many people said Wellesley, but Wellesley ended up being the team to crash that party, earn a Final Four berth. You mentioned Lucas Prock. He's coming back. Tennyson Charney's coming back at receiver. He was really a nice playmaker for them down the stretch. I think Wellesley's going to be in this conversation again next year.
Yeah, and again, I think that, when you look at what they have coming back, predominantly a young team, to your point, Tyler, I do think they'll be in the conversation again next year in the Bay State League. In the Bay State League, when we talk about league and conference resurgence, Bay State League the last couple of years in particular has seen a resurgence in terms of their teams and making deep playoff runs. All right, next up at number 23, we have a team that is accustomed to making deep playoff runs after a down year last year. They bounced back, I should say, this year. Central Catholic out of the MVC.
Yeah, again, another one of those teams that you don't always know where to put because they play such a tough schedule. But I think their best win might have been that one over Franklin. I think they beat Weymouth as well. And they just played really well against a tough schedule. So, I think this is still a young team. I would say that a lot of these guys are sophomores. So I think you might see this team a little higher next year. But the Raiders have the chance to, do some great things, keep that young core together and see what can happen. So I'm excited to see this team going forward.
Yeah, it was kind of tough for this program last year in 2023. Not only did Coach Adamopoulos step away after a great run at Central Catholic, but they also had a pretty inexperienced team. So I think Coach Sexton's really going to have this thing going in the right direction starting next year. They're certainly worthy of this spot at number 23 right now, but I would guess that next year they start in the preseason like 8 to 10 next year would be my guess. Quarterback Caden Smith's one of the better dual threat quarterbacks in the state. He's only a sophomore. He's returning. As well as a bunch of other pieces. So expect Central Catholic to kind of rejoin that D1 contender conversation next year.
Yeah, it's certainly a team to watch, especially, and again, this time of year, typically it is wide open heading into next season. We have to obviously do a lot of legwork to figure out who we like and give you some ideas as to where we're going with our early polling next year. But Central Catholic's a team that's going to be pretty high on those polls. Next up, number 22, we have a Leominster. Great year for Osiris Lopez and company. This is a program that under Devin Gates has really, really turned things around. They've experienced a lot of success in recent years. They took another meaningful step towards becoming a contender in Division I this year. Nice season for the Blue Devils.
Yeah, I think, you look at those two losses, Xaverian and Catholic Memorial. You're not going to penalize the team too much for that. I didn't want to take them out of the top 25. Like you said, Osiris Lopez is just an incredible player at quarterback. He's got D1 offers. I'm not sure where he's going to go yet. That'll be interesting to watch. But Leominster, look, this is a team that if they can build around Lopez, if they can build around the playmakers around him, then this is a team that could be in the top 10 next year. I really feel that way. They're close to that. So, again, like you said, Devin Gates does a great job with these kids. They play at one of the best places to see a game. And so I'm excited about them, and I think they're going to be good going forward.
Yeah, I think Osiris Lopez is kind of on the short list of players we're looking forward to watching in 2025 who have a realistic chance of winning Gatorade Player of the Year. We saw Aiden Williams just win it this week for Needham. I think Osiris Lopez is going to be in that conversation next year. Very dynamic player. He can beat you with his arm, beat you with his legs. If Leominster can even get that defense to 80% of what the offense is, they're going to be a scary team in D1 next year. Like you said, Adam, they lost to two of the top teams in the state. They're certainly worthy of cracking the top 25.
And finally, we come back to the Bay State League for the 21st team in our final MIAA poll for the 2024 season. Another program that experienced a resurgence this year, and that, of course, is Natick, led by Mark Mortarelli. The Red Hawks finished 9-2 on the season.
Yeah, I think this is another team that's got its best football ahead of it because a lot of the key players are juniors or sophomores. Offensive lineman, I think, is Michael Whalen, at about 6'4", 300 pounds, is one of the best linemen in the Bay State Conference. And again, I think, over the summer, Coach Mark Mortarelli told me that he felt really positive about his line, and that's why he felt really optimistic. They're good at the skill positions too, but he really liked their line. So again, I think that's going to be true next year. I think their line's going to stay pretty good. And so are they somebody who could put together a Needham type season? Maybe. But they're getting closer, and their only losses were to Needham and Springfield Central. So, I mean, those are pretty heavy hitters. If you beat everybody other than them, you're doing pretty well, and that's what they're doing. So I'm happy for Natick. It's been a good season for them.
It was a good season for them. Again, this is another program. We know the tradition there. We know that they're, again, a big school, a lot of athletes in that school, well-coached program. Natick, I think, is going to pretty much consistently be in our top 40 in the preseason. I think they'll probably crack the top 25 next preseason, but they had a nice year, making to the Division I playoffs.
Yeah, and again, it's nice to see them back. This is a traditional power program in Massachusetts high school football. So to see Natick football, not that they've been dormant or anything, but they haven't been the program that we had been accustomed to seeing for years, year in and year out in the old Bay State League. When it was them, when it was Walpole, you had some tremendous matchups. And I think that it's nice to see this Natick football program be in the conversation again as a possible state title contender. And I think, Adam, you bring up a great point. When we think about, all right, who can have a special season like Needham did this year? Natick, I think, is a team that certainly checks off a lot of those boxes in terms of returning experience. They're not going to have the skill group that Needham had this year coming back. They may not even have an impactful player to the level of an Aiden Williams, but they have enough back that when you look at the pedigree of this program, they could certainly be a team that could potentially have the type of year that Needham had this past season. All right. Next up, we're going to go to teams 20 through 16 in our final MIAA Top 25 poll for the 2024 season. At number 20, we go back to the MVC for the Methuen Rangers. Good season for Coach Ryan's squad. Shane Easton, one of the best players in the state. Methuen finished the season 9-2.
I think when you think of Methuen, you think explosive. And that's really what they were this season. That's what they've been for the last few seasons now, is an explosive offensive team. They could match points with just about anyone. They obviously lost to St. John's Prep in the state tournament, but they had a great year. Again, that offense was so tough to stop. I don't know how you sort of game plan for that offense because they're just so creative. They use screens, a lot of bubble screens, stuff like that. So I was impressed with them this year, and I'm not sure what they have coming back. I think their quarterback might come back, but it's gonna be tough to replace Shane Eason. But this coaching staff has proven that they can get it done. So it'll be another team to watch in the MVC next year.
As far as big public schools go, Methuen's been as consistent as really anyone in the state these last few years, with the Eason brothers leading the way there for Coach Ryan. Another great year for Methuen. I saw them play early in the year against Marshfield. There's no question that they're consistently one of the best offensive teams in the state. Losing Eason, he's going to be impossible to replace, but I'm sure they'll have some skill guys, and they'll be able to beat you in a couple different ways next year moving forward. Quarterback Josh Danella is back. I thought he was a pretty impressive player this year as a junior.
All right, next up, we're going to move down to the South Coast with our 19th ranked team in our final MIAA Top 25 poll for the 2024 season. That is the Fairhaven Blue Devils coming off a tough loss last Wednesday night to Hudson in the D6 Super Bowl, capping off the great career of Justin Marks. Blue Devils finished 10-3. Of course, they won the Super Bowl in D6 last year, but it's been quite a run for Derek Almeida's squad the last 2 years.
Yeah, Fairhaven had a great year. I like that spot for them in our top 25. I think, Marks was a great player. Unfortunately, he wasn't able to finish the D6 state title game against Hudson. But, again, that offense, that option stuff is so hard to defend. Almeida's so great with it. And this team was good. I mean, one of those only losses was to BC High, which was, a game which they were competitive in, very competitive. It was maybe a 5-point game going into the fourth quarter. And their other loss was to Dartmouth on Thanksgiving. So, listen, I think they would have liked to have repeated, but they still had a great year. And, they lose a lot for next year. But, again, this is a program that's in good shape. Almeida is known to work his magic, so no tears for Fairhaven.
Yeah, I mean, let's just revisit those 3 losses. You mentioned BC High, a Division I semifinalist. They lost to Dartmouth, who was a Division III quarterfinalist, and then they lost, obviously, to Hudson in the state championship game without Marks. In that game on Thanksgiving, they didn't have quarterback Cam Burke, so it's really tough to penalize them. I know they're a D6 team with 3 losses, but it's the 3 good teams, and they were missing 2 key players, arguably their 2 best players in those final 2 matchups. So I think it was a great year for Haven and a great career for Justin Marks. They're certainly worthy of this spot.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see how they move ahead without Marks next season. Something tells me they'll be just fine. Coach Almeida has built a solid program there at Fairhaven, and with the offense that they run, as long as they have the backs in place, they're going to be tough to play against and tough to defend on a week-to-week basis. Next up is West Boylston, who completed the 3-peat last week on Friday by defeating Randolph in the D8 Super Bowl. Mike Ross's squad not only won the Super Bowl for the 3rd straight year, but also won 10 games. And when you look at this West Boylston team, the Lions are well positioned to potentially get back to a D8 Super Bowl next year and go for a 4-peat. Some might say that 18 is a little too low for this program because this has been a program that's been pretty consistent and one that I think we talk about this often, right? Like, are they underrated? What are your thoughts on that this might be too low for them, that they should be higher, and that the program is underrated?
Well, we do a lot of this based on accomplishment. It's not necessarily this team would beat that team. Like, for instance, if West Boylston played Methuen tomorrow, I think Methuen would be favored. But West Boylston won the D8 Super Bowl, the state title, and you have to reward them for that. And also, like, you don't like to say that other years matter too, but like West Boylston won the D7 state title and the last 2 D8 state titles. You're also judging them on that and saying, all right, well, are they better than we thought? So I do think they might be underrated here, but I think this is a pretty good spot given how they match up with sort of the bigger schools. But again, they deserve, everything that comes their way. They've certainly had a great season. A couple losses, that's fine. They played a tough Central Mass schedule.
Yeah, it's a great program. Coach Mike Ross is one of only 2 coaches in state history to win a Super Bowl at 3 different schools. Of course, John DiBiaso is the other. But Mike Ross, again, he's won 5 Super Bowls now at 3 different schools. He's won 3 in a row, and he's at 199 career wins. So week 1, potentially a milestone game for him next year. He's a great coach, runs a great program, and that offense is tough to stop. They have big, physical, strong kids in the backfield and on the line. It's much bigger and much more physical than what teams are accustomed to playing at that level. And they return players like Dominic Renzoni next year. So they're going to be right back in the mix. I would say they're probably the favorite to win D8 and be the first team in the statewide era, 2013 to present, to win 4 state championships in a row. It's a great program. I think Aiden Hamilton, like we're going to be unveiling an all-state team probably next month at some point in January. Aiden Hamilton's a kid that's going to have to be on that list. Absolute game wrecker at linebacker for West Boylston. One of the better linebackers I saw this year, regardless of division.
All right. Next up, we're going to stay in Central Mass, and our number 17th ranked team in our final MIAA Top 25 poll is the Uxbridge Spartans. Matt Blood squad going back-to-back in Division 7. They currently own the longest winning streak in the state at 27 in a row. Just another impressive season for this program. And again, we talk about programs that fly under the radar. This is a program that has been flying under the radar the last 2 years. They have been very good, and thus they're your back-to-back Division 7 state champs.
Yeah, again, just solid all the way through the season. You could argue, and it's probably true, that they weren't as dominant as they were last year. They had a couple kind of close games this year, but they were still awesome. And Camden LaChapelle, I mean, what a player this kid is. It's amazing that he still has 1 year left.
It's crazy.
I mean, he's electric with the ball in his hands. He's super twitchy. He's got great change of direction skills. And he can hurt you as a receiver or as a runner. And they've got other guys, too, that can make big plays. Again, this is a team that I'd like to see against maybe a bigger school once in a while just to see what they would do, because I feel like they would give some bigger schools a hard time. But, again, props to Uxbridge. I mean, they're probably the favorite again to win next year to get that three-peat. So you got West Boylston and Uxbridge, just like stomping teams out there. So very impressive to watch these guys go.
Yeah, West Boylston and Uxbridge, they're the class of the small school programs in the state right now, not just in Central Mass, but across the entire state. Hard to argue with the results. Uxbridge owns by far the longest winning streak in the state at this point. And I think that's going to continue on next season with Camden LaChapelle back. He's an all-state level back, over 2,000 yards this year, over 30 touchdowns. Both were school records. And he capped it off with 260 yards from scrimmage in the state championship win over Mashpee. He's one hell of a player. They're going to need to find a new quarterback. They'll be starting their third quarterback in 3 years. But at this point, I don't think it matters. Coach Blood really has it going there at Uxbridge.
All right, and finally, we are going to come back to the Hockomock League for the number 16 team in our final MIAA Top 25 poll. That is the Foxborough Warriors, who finished 8-5. They fell short in the Division 5 title game against Shawsheen, 14-0 in what I thought might have been the best game of the 3 days. It was truly a battle, but nonetheless, still a pretty good season for the Warriors, but a disappointing finish.
Yeah, I thought the Warriors battled hard at Gillette. They just couldn't. You never really saw the offense, get out of neutral. It just never really. They never really got that offense going the way they wanted to. But what a year for Foxborough, because they lost a bunch of games at the beginning of the season, and I think a lot of people wrote them off. But they really battled back and played quite well and got themselves back to Gillette. Now, are they going to be disappointed that they didn't win it? Sure, but they should feel proud of what they accomplished over these last couple of years. They played Shawsheen really tough, and it just didn't get going for them. But it's still a great season.
It was a great season, and you mentioned that schedule. They really beefed it up. They played a very challenging schedule, particularly for a Division 5 program. This is a team that lost to King Philip with Ben Angelini not back to 100% yet, and KP, we know, a top 5 team in the state for sure. They lost to Walpole, who we had talked about earlier. They lost to Scituate on a Hail Mary. So they were really challenged themselves in the non-conference gate. They lost to Mansfield. They beat North Attleboro. They lost to Shawsheen. So, listen to all these teams that played in Super Bowls that Foxborough played this year. It's pretty remarkable. But 8-5, another great season for Jack Martinelli. Ben Angelini had a great career at Foxborough. And I think some people might say, that's a little high for a 5-loss team, but I think the schedule and the strength of schedule really matters here. And I'm totally comfortable with them at 16.
All right, you are watching the final MIAA Top 25 Reveal Show, sponsored by Gold Athletics. I'm your host, John Serenitas. As always, I'm joined by my partners, Tyler Amaral and Adam Kirkshin. Just a reminder that Gold Athletics is your one-stop shop for fundraising. They recently expanded into Maine and New Hampshire with Blaze and Jeff Whitman. They are ready to support even more programs across New England. Whether you're in football or any other sport, reach out to Gold Athletics and they'll make sure your program raises the money. All right. And we're going to continue here now with our countdown. And we're now going to take a look at which teams slotted in the 15 to 11 spots in our final MIAA Top 25 poll. And we'll start with number 15, the Mansfield Hornets, coming off a tough 35-0 loss to North Attleboro in the Division III Super Bowl last Friday night. Mike Redding, who won his 300th game on Thanksgiving against rival Foxborough. Mike Redding's Hornets finished 9-4. And look, let's be honest here. I think at the beginning of the year when we looked at D3 was kind of jumbled. We didn't really know who would come out of D3, who we liked, who we didn't like. We kind of felt like it was a 5 or 6 team race. I know a lot of people liked North Attleboro, and they ended up winning it all. But I don't think too many people had this Mansfield team. I think a lot of people felt that despite the fact that D3 was wide open, Mansfield was probably a year away. Kudos to Mike Redding and his staff for getting a lot, out of this team and getting this group to Gillette Stadium. Again, at the beginning of the year, I don't think a lot of us thought that this was a Super Bowl caliber squad.
No, I don't think I had them ranked, but I didn't have them super high. They had Tommy Vallette at quarterback, but he was a junior, and I thought his senior year was going to be the one where he gets to Gillette. Mansfield, again, this is one of Mike Redding's best coaching jobs because, as you said, like we liked them. We had them in our top 25 and all, but I don't think we were necessarily that high on them. And they got by on, just being tough, good athletes. And so, obviously they're going to be disappointed with the North Attleboro game, but I think they feel like this is another year where they can get back coming up. So it'll be interesting to see how Mansfield moves forward.
Yeah, I didn't have them quite making it this far this year. I thought they'd be sort of in the semifinal mix, a top 6-ish team in Division III, and they surpassed expectations. They had a very good year. They have a lot of skill back next year, starting with quarterback Tommy Vallette. They do lose some line pieces. They lose an explosive dynamic weapon in Sean McCoy. But other than that, this team has a lot of skill back due to some realignment and some teams leaving the division. I think Mansfield's going to be right in the mix. But what else is new with the Mike Redding coach? His team's going to be in the mix again next year.
All righty, and continuing with our poll here at number 14, another familiar team that's usually in the top 15 to 10 when the season ends. No different this year. The Duxbury Dragons, who lost to Scituate last Thursday in the D4 Super Bowl 29-13. But despite that, still a really, really, really good season for the Dragons, another 10-win season. And what can you say about Coach Landolfi and that staff doing a great job getting this program back to a Super Bowl? It's a rite of passage for Duxbury football, and this season was no different.
Yeah, it was a good year for Duxbury. But by their standards, because they're at Gillette every year, I thought they did an amazing job to get to that point. I thought Scituate was the favorite going into that game. And, for Duxbury, it's a tough loss, but that was a really good season. I mean, I think their losses were to Franklin, Marshfield, and Scituate. So, is this a team? I don't know if they're going to get back there next year, but they always do. They practically pay rent at Gillette. So I'm done doubting this program. They'll be having another great season next year for sure. Duxbury can hold its head high.
Yeah, again, another great year. We just kind of expect this team to reload at this point. Alex Barlow was one of the best players in the state last year. They replaced him nicely this year with Jack Reese. I think Jack Reese really emerged as an all-state level player for this team. Trevor Jones, we know about as well. They're losing a ton from this team, though, so Coach Landolfi will really have his work cut out for him next year, but there's no reason to believe this team won't end up in a similar position again next year. And who knows, they might find themselves at Gillette again. They are being moved up here, realigned to Division III, so it could be a little bit more challenging, but don't doubt this program.
Yeah, I wouldn't. I mean, their track record would suggest that would be a foolish move. All right, next up at number 13, we go back to Central Mass, and it's Grafton, who finished 10-1, another great year for the Gators. Of course, head coach Chris McMahon stepping down after the season, so it'll be a different look for the program next year. We want to wish Coach McMahon nothing but the best. Did a tremendous job there with this Grafton program the last few years, making them a contender in Division IV, and they once again were in the mix this season as well, losing in the semifinals to Scituate in a great game, but another terrific season for a Grafton program, which you can count on year in and year out now to be a state title contender, regardless of what division they're in.
Yeah, Grafton, I didn't think brought a ton back, but they still played really well. Certainly one of the best teams in Central Mass and really one of the best teams in the state. If you look at it, that Scituate game they lost, was a close game. It was 14-3. That was sort of like the closest Scituate had all playoffs. And so always a physical team, always run the ball well. And McMahon was a great coach. And so I just think this is just a good team, and they're always tough, and they played well in the postseason. So it was a good season for Grafton for sure.
Yeah, I think Grafton was one of the more physical teams I saw all year. I was at that Scituate game. They were down 7-3 with like 2.5, 3 minutes left in the game, and lost. Foley scored a touchdown for Scituate. So other than that Foxborough game in week 1, Scituate wasn't challenged at all the rest of the season, other than this game against Grafton. Grafton under Coach McMahon, they were consistently one of the better defensive programs in the state. You knew what to expect out of a Grafton coach team. This year's team was super physical, very big at the point of attack, and Finn Gilmore coming back from injury really emerged as, I think, a all-state caliber running back. He was really the workhorse and the catalyst for that team offensively. But it'll be interesting to kind of see what Grafton looks like moving forward, because under Coach McMahon, we knew we could pencil them in as a preseason top 25 team. Now we'll have to, kind of reevaluate and reassess the program moving forward without him leading the way.
All right, we're inching closer to our revealing our top 10. But before we do that, we still have 2 more schools left in our top 15, and that is number 12, Marshfield. Rams finishing 10-2. They lost to King Philip in the semifinal round of the Division II playoffs. Disappointing finish for Chris Aruka's squad, but another great season for this program. A program that, look, let's face it, Marshall's is going to be in the mix year in and year out, regardless of what division they're in. This year was no different. Tormos and company put up big numbers. It didn't end the way this group wanted to after getting to a Super Bowl last year. But, again, another terrific season for Marshfield and a senior class that is one of the more decorated classes that has gone through there in recent years.
Yeah, and their losses were to St. John's Prep and King Philip. No shame in that at all. They won the games they were supposed to, and those are tough losses. Another one game that they won that was a big one for them was over Methuen earlier in the season. That's a huge win because Methuen had a great season, and so Marshfield, they'll be back. This was a good senior group. Remember, this is the same group that last year beat Catholic Memorial in the D2 state playoffs. So, I fully expect Aruka to bring back more kids and just and really take that next step next year. They lose a lot though. They do lose a lot, but I feel like he's got this program in good shape.
Yeah, I think Marshfield's biggest win of the year was dominating Duxbury on Thanksgiving to finally end Duxbury's reign atop the Patriot League, which that was like their first conference loss in 15 years or 17 years? Was it 07? Was that the last time they lost in conference?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like something insane like that. But Marshfield finally ended Duxbury's reign atop the Patriot League. That senior class was very good, led by Tormas. I think Tufts got a steal with Tormas.
I agree.
He's a very good player. Davin Charlie Carroll. It was just an excellent skill group. Chris Aruka is going to have this team back, though. We talk about teams that are difficult to defend. We typically talk about double wing teams, triple option teams, run-based teams. This Marshfield team is so difficult to defend because of the pace that they play at, and that's going to continue under Coach Chris Aruka. So I expect Marshfield to be right back in the mix. Might take a little, September might be a bit of a learning curve next year, but I think by the end of the season, Chris Aruka is going to have this team playing playoff football again.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, they'll be in the mix again in Division II. There's no doubt about it. And D2's from a composition standpoint is going to be a lot different next year with realignment. So I think there's going to be more teams for one because they're balancing out the divisions, but also I think it's going to be more competitive. But Marshfield will be in that mix. Another team that's going to be in Division II next year is your Division III champion, and they are the number 11 team in our final MIAA Top 25 poll, and that is the North Attleboro Red Rocketeers, who defeated rival Mansfield, as I mentioned earlier, in the D3 Super Bowl on Friday night to win their first state title in 22 years. Congratulations to Mike Strack and his staff and the Red Rocketeers. Tremendous senior class. They go out on top. They deliver a state title for a town that is football crazy. They love their football. They finally have a state title for the first time since 2002. Not much you could say about a magical season for this North Attleboro football program. Big Red football is back.
Yeah, it was great to see. They're always close. They're usually winning a couple games in the state tournament. They lost to St. John Shrewsbury one year. They lost to Marblehead another year. But they really broke through. Again, like you said, that senior class, Chase Forsoli, the quarterback, started as a freshman. And he's a physical player. So by the time he was a senior, he was a beast. And then Ryan Bannon, running back and linebacker, who's going to want to tackle a 6'3", 230-pound running back? Not many people, as we found out this week. Again, this was a hard team to keep out of the top 10 because they played so well. I mean, I was sort of expecting them to do well, but they did even better because I thought that Mansfield game would be close. It was not. They really, North Attleboro really took it to them. So it was a really good win for North Attleboro. It's great for the town. It's great for everybody that follows high school football there. So I was impressed. And they lose a lot, but I think they'll be in the mix next year as well. Because I think they'll be pretty good up front again. But I think, just an incredible season for North. Their only losses were to Canton and to Foxborough in Davenport play. And so they really, again, like you watch most of these teams, this was probably one of the most physical teams at Gillette last week. They were just so good up front. So I was impressed, and they had a great year.
Yeah, it was a great run for Coach Streck in North, and congratulations to him bringing one back to his alma mater. That's a cool story there. North really could have gone undefeated. They could have been a 13-0 team. They lost close to Canton, lost close to Foxborough. Couple bounces in their favor rather than Canton and Foxborough, and this team could be undefeated. And I think they'd be impossible to keep out of the top 10 at that point. I think Ryan Bannon is one of the better players in the state. Kind of stating the obvious there, but he's the Georgetown commit linebacker. He really emerged as a running back this year too. He's a great player. You mentioned Forsoli, 4-year starter. They lose a ton, but one of the key returners is junior two-way lineman Nathan Rivera. He's a absolute force on at tackle on offense and at end on defense. He's a very good player. I think North. It wouldn't surprise me if they're a playoff team in D2 next year, but they're losing a ton. So I'm curious to see how Coach Strachan sort of rebuilds on the fly here.
Yeah, it'll be interesting, but nonetheless, a special season for North Attleboro football. Big Red is back. They are your Division III state title champions for the 2024 season. All right, so that brings us to the top 10. You ready, gentlemen? This is where it gets dicey now. This is where you're going to have to defend your logic here. So we are going to start with the 10th team in our final top 25 poll for this season, and that is the Hudson Hawks. Finished undefeated at 13-0, your Division VI state champions. A tremendous season for Jake Attaway, his dad, Zach Attaway, the coach. There's not much you could say about this program. They were knocking on the door last year. They kicked the door down, beating Fairhaven 21-14 in the D6 state title game.
Yeah, there may not have been a more dominant player all week last week than Jake Attaway. Like, running, passing, and they didn't really slip up at all season. They were just there. They kept winning, and they were great against their schedule. They were great against the Division VI, competition. There was just never really a reason to move them down, and they've been close to they've been a top 15 team for us for a while now. But the word for them is dominant, because that's what they were, and they were just a great team all year.
Yeah, I mean, they were building to this point for a while now. That senior class have been playing together 10 years now. It's a very deep senior class, tight-knit senior group. Awesome that Zach Attaway is able to win one with his son, Jake. Listen, Jake Attaway was an outstanding player, surefire all-state player. You could probably slot him in at quarterback or safety. He's one hell of a player. I thought, that was one of the craziest things we saw last week was his Willis Reed return to the field after hobbling off and get carried off the field there with the ankle injury, and then he comes back. Clearly not 100%, but he gutted it out and led Hudson to a state championship.
Shout out to Logan Dome, who threw a touchdown pass.
Right. Shout out to Logan Dome. Only pass of the season. He made it count.
Yeah.
So, I mean, listen, this Hudson team, they were fun to watch. They were fun to watch last year. Last year, you could see that they were going to be building to this point, and it'd probably come down to them in Fairhaven again this year, and it did. It's really turning into a great program. I think, if you did a little Central Mass tournament right now, I think even though they're a D6 school, I think they'd be right there with Leominster and Grafton. Resume aside, if they just played on the field, I think they'd be right there with those teams as well in the higher divisions.
All right. A fantastic year for the Hudson football program. As you mentioned, Tyler, Coach Attaway, his staff, and the kids have been building up to this point. And these seniors capped off a great 4-year run with a state title. All right, that brings us to the number 9 team in our final MIAA Top 25 poll for the 2024 season, and that is the Shawsheen Rams. The Rams are your Division V state champions, undefeated, slinging Sid Tildesley and company, getting it done at Gillette Stadium in a hard-fought win over Foxborough. It is Shawsheen's second state title as a program. Of course, they won it in 2010. Longtime coach Al Constabile talked about this senior class and how they had built to this point and how this was the expectation. And the Rams were able to get it done and become your Division V state champs.
Yeah, this is kind of like a Hudson. They just never gave you room to doubt them. They never lost a game. They played very few close games, and they really just got it done all the way through. Like that win over Foxborough, I thought was really impressive because Foxborough was a bigger team up front, and they held their end down. And look, Sid Tildesley, what else can you say? I mean, the guy's done everything. Again, he's very much like Attaway at Hudson, just putting up incredible numbers. And Shawsheen toughened up their schedule this year, and they got Wayland on there. They got Bedford. So I was impressed with them all the way through, and I did kind of have a feeling that they might beat Foxborough, but I wasn't sure. And they really, played their best game to beat them in the playoffs there. So just a tremendous career for Tildesley, and really for that team is just a great season, and they really deserved it.
Yeah, and there was some there was a bit of debate about this, whether we ranked Shawsheen 9 or 10, and whether we ranked Hudson 9 or 10. I think ultimately we decided on Shawsheen because they didn't just win in a higher division, one division higher, but I think their overall resume was a little more impressive. Like that beating a very good Foxborough team 14-0, that was their closest game all year. Whereas Hudson played 3 consecutive one-score games in the playoffs to cap off that dominant season. But Shawsheen, nobody ever played them to a one-score game. 14-point win over Foxborough in the state championship was their closest game of the year. They absolutely stifled Foxborough. That offense, the Warrior offense only had, 58 yards, I think it was, held under 60 yards, which is just ridiculous. You mentioned Tildesley. He is similar to Attaway, and I think he's another guy that you could slot into an all-state team at quarterback or defensive back. It doesn't matter. His brother James at linebacker, one hell of a player as well. So it's been quite a ride here for Shawsheen these last few years, and it culminated in this Division 5 state championship, and they're certainly worthy of this number 9 spot.
All right. Well, we're going to continue here now. We're into the top 10 in our final MIAA top 25 poll for the 2024 season. And next up, the number 8 team in our poll, the Springfield Central Golden Eagles, who are Division I quarterfinalists. They finished 8-2 on the season. This one for me is, we talk about the three of us debating things. There's some sticking points in this top 10 for me. This is one of them, and I'll explain why after you guys explain your thoughts.
I thought it was a tough season for Springfield. So I thought they would be, at Gillette for sure at the beginning of the year. I thought they were, it's tough. They lost a couple games. They lost to Iona Prep of New York, and they lost to BC High in the postseason. So I expected them to keep winning and have certainly a longer stay. But if you want to argue for them, they beat Xaverian, the team who went on to win our Division I state title. They beat Central Catholic pretty decisively, I would say. And then, it just didn't work for them when it got to the playoffs. They got to a big deficit, then they came back. And so it was like, I felt like they could have had a better season, but still fine. And I think that next year they're going to be an interesting team. They bring back quarterback Jareth Stain and running back Isaiah Rogers, 2 Division I prospects. So yeah, I thought they could have been better, but it's still a good season. They beat good teams. So yeah.
Yeah, I think it was a bit of a disappointment. They were my clear-cut favorite entering the year to win the Division I title. Just because they disappointed, I don't think that means they had a bad season by any means. We know what they did to the Western Mass portion of the schedule, challenged themselves again with Iona Prep. They beat Xaverian, the Division I champion. They beat Central Catholic, as you mentioned, Adam, and then they beat Natick in the first round of the playoffs. Of course, they would have liked to have beat BCI and gotten back to the Division I semifinals. They weren't able to do that. But overall, I think the body of work is good enough to have them inside the top 10.
Yeah, I don't. I don't think that they should be in the top 10. I've felt that, for me, when I look at them, you guys make valid arguments in regards to their resume and who they beat, but I have a hard time putting them in the top 10, let's say over somebody like a North Attleboro, who I think probably deserves to be in the top 10. Strength of schedule matters. Played a really good schedule. I think the hard part for me is, and you guys touched on this, my expectations were so high for them coming into the season. I too thought they were going to win D1. I just don't think they lived up to it. Now, you can make the argument that they're not quite there. I think next year, with Stain and Rogers being a year older, and I think a lot of their young talent being more experienced, yeah, you could probably put those expectations on them as a preseason favorite. But I thought that for a program that's been a major player in the high school football landscape in Massachusetts in recent years, they felt kind of irrelevant. And I think that they have a lot to prove next year. I think Bill Watson will get this team ready to play. And I think that they will ultimately position themselves to prove people wrong. But I wrestle with them being in the top 10. Nonetheless, are they worthy of it? Sure. Their resume, they played a good schedule. You mentioned Iona. And it just felt like they could have been on the outside looking in. But again, they'll be a player nonetheless next year. All right. Moving along here. Next up, we have BC High as the number 7 team in our final top 25 poll here. And of course, the Eagles under first-year coach Paul Zukowskis finishing 8-3. They were Division I semifinalist. And one thing I will say about this BC High football team, I think coming into the season, we didn't know what to expect. I think they exceeded expectations. And I think if you're Paul Zukowskis, this was a terrific first year for him at the helm. I think this program is back. I think they're going to be a player now in the Catholic Conference. And I think the Catholic Conference, which is already a great conference, is even deeper now.
Yeah, I think I was super impressed with them when I saw them against Zavarian, even though they lost that game. But earlier in the year, they had beaten Zavarian. Look, I think this is a team that's going to be able to run the ball, that's going to have good offensive line play. They beat some good teams. Obviously, they beat Springfield Central in the quarterfinals in D1. Their losses are to really good teams. Their losses are to Zavarian, Catholic Memorial, and St. John's Prep. And if those are the only teams that beat you in a given season, you've had a good season. So I was impressed. I think they're only going to get better under Paul. He's a great coach, and I'm really interested to see how they, build off this.
Yeah, I agree. I think, I didn't really know what to make of this team. I thought they would kind of be around 500. I thought they would be like a 6-5 team, something like that. They exceeded my expectations. I think they exceeded most people's expectations. And I agree that I think the arrow's pointing up with this program under the direction of Paul Zukowskis. I think they're back to being that legitimate contender in Division I in the Catholic Conference. And this is just the start of, good things to come here for this program. I definitely, it took me a bit to believe in them, even after the win. They beat like LaSalle earlier from Rhode Island Power. They beat Fairhaven early in the year, but I still wasn't fully sure what to make of this team until they beat Zavarian in the regular season. And then I knew that at that point that this team was for real, and they doubled down on that and were able to beat Springfield Central in the playoffs to get back to the D1 semifinals. So it was a great first year for Coach Zukowskis at BC High.
Yeah, and again, when you think about what they have coming through the program in the next couple of years, they will certainly be a factor in the Catholic Conference for years to come. An impressive debut season for Paul Zukowskis at his alma mater. All right, continuing here with our final top 25 poll of the 2024 season as we get closer to the top 5. Next up, we have number 6, the Scituate Sailors. Scituate capping off an impressive season with a 13-0 record and a Division IV state title, beating rival Duxbury in the D4 state title game, 29-13. What a season for Herb Devine and this program. And, when you think of Scituate football, guys, this is their 3rd state title since 2018. When we talk about teams that are perennial visitors to Gillette Stadium, whether it be Duxbury, whether it be King Philip, whether it be Catholic Memorial, Zavarian, Scituate has to be in that conversation too. That's 3 titles in the last 6 years. It's been quite the run for Herb Devine and his staff. This is a Scituate program. When he took over, I'm not going to go as far as saying it was dormant, but it was not a good program. And he's made it into this, and his staff has made it into this. What a tremendous, tremendous season for this program. A program, and let's face it, they could be back here again next year with what they have back. They are well positioned to keep this going.
Yeah, his offenses are always so good. They really clocked some good teams. Like, if you think of like Hanover, They beat Hanover 52-0. Like, that doesn't happen. That's not a regular occurrence for them. I mean, Situate's, again, one of these teams that was dominant. They had a dominant run through the season. It was not just, oh, we're going to slip by some teams. They clobbered some good teams. And they started with that Hail Mary win over Foxborough at the beginning of the season. And then after that, they just kept, they really jumped out to a big lead against Duxbury last week. And so, I was just impressed. This is a team that could easily be top 5 team. But I was just really, taken aback by how good they really were. I thought they'd be good this season. I didn't think this, though, where they really almost blew out most of the teams they played. So, so a great season for Scituate.
Yeah, another great year for Coach Devine. Yeah, I mean, John, you kind of stole my thunder there. Like before Coach Devine and his staff got there, like Scituate football wasn't ever much of a player, wasn't really ever in title discussions, but that's 3 in the last 6 seasons and 4 championship game appearances in the last 6 seasons. So they're one of the better programs in the state, definite top 10 program in the state at this point in time. They had a very good senior class. Some younger pieces emerged throughout the year, like guys like sophomore Lawson Foley, but this is a very good senior class that really took one on the chin last year, lost 62-33 to Duxbury. They were super motivated by that this year. They were able to get back to Gillette and able to avenge the loss to Duxbury a year later, which I think made it a little bit sweeter for that senior class. Quarterback Johnny Donovan, and I just mentioned Lawson Foley. They're back. I'm sorry, Grayson Foley are back for this team next year. Johnny Donovan's a guy that I think just got better each and every week as a first-year starter. First-year starter in the program, broke the program record for most touchdown passes in a season. So he's poised for a monster senior year. He was throwing the ball all over the field against Duxbury, 4 touchdown passes in the first half. So I think Situate's well positioned to kind of make a run here again in Division IV next year. But it was a dominant season, one of the most dominant resumes, one of the most dominant runs of any team in the state this year. They're definitely worthy of the 6th spot here, and potentially there was, I think, a case to be made that they could have been 4 or 5 as well.
All right, and with that, we have now entered the top 5 in our final MIAA Top 25 poll for the 2024 season. And without further ado, at number 5, we have St. John's Prep. The Eagles finished the season 10-2. They were a Division I semifinalist. I think by their standards, this was a disappointing season for the Prep. This is a program that perennially is a Division I title contender. Of course, they won it a couple of years ago. I think coming into the season, especially once we found out that Christopher Vargas was going to start, I think a lot of people had them penciled in at the very least at getting to Gillette Stadium. It didn't happen. Disappointing loss to CM. Disappointing loss to Needham in the playoffs. Ultimately, the Eagles fall short, but they are going to remain a player in Division I. They have a bevy of talented young players coming back next year. Brian St. Pierre's squad should stay in the mix in the top division in the state.
Yeah, I think Chris Vargas really stepped forward for them as a playmaker at quarterback this year. I think Merrick Barlow had a great season at receiver, even better than people expected, and he's going to Navy. So I think the Prep had a good year. But again, you're right. At a place like the Prep, if you don't get to Gillette, it is kind of a disappointing thing, even though it's still a great season if you look at it. So they lose a lot, but they still should be in the mix. They always are. They always just reload really fast. So I think they'll miss losing that Needham game was tough for them. But again, I think going forward, they can get back there for sure. And Vargas is going to be somebody we're going to want to watch a lot over the next few years.
Yeah, I think the Prep, their resume, their strength of schedule is the reason why they're here over Scituate. They didn't quite pull it off in Division I, but they were a Division I semifinalist, lost a 1-score game to Needham. This is a team that dominated BC High, dominated Marshfield this year. So they had some really impressive wins. They got blown out by Catholic Memorial, but Catholic Memorial did that to everybody for the most part in the state this year. So I think St. John's Prep, you mentioned Vargas. Of course, it starts with him. If he's back in the fold next year, this is going to be they're going to be a top 5 team in the preseason once again. Again, probably a little disappointing for Coach St. Pierre, and that just speaks to what he's built here at St. John's Prep.
All right, and continuing here with the top 5, we're now into the top 4 in our final MIAA Top 25 poll for the 2024 season. At number 4, we have the Needham Rockets, who were your Division I runner-up, losing to Xaverian in the Division I Super Bowl last Thursday. A historic season for the Needham football program. First team to win 12 games. Doug Kopsko, of course, being named the New England Patriots Coach of the Year. In Division I, Aiden Williams, the Gatorade Player of the Year. Plenty of accolades here. Unfortunately for the Rockets, they fell short in their goal of winning a state title. But what an incredibly historic season for a program that I've coached against for a long time, whether it be when I was a head coach at Norwood or whether it be during my time at King Philip. I've always been someone who has had a ton of respect for this program from the outside looking in, whether it's Roy Johan coaching there or Dave Duffy or Doug now. It's just a terrific program with terrific people that do it right. And this is, look, losing in a state title game sucks. It hurts. It takes a while for the pain to go away, but it shouldn't take away from an unreal season for a program that, quite frankly, through the years has always been competitive and in the mix.
Yeah, it was a great year for Needham. Aiden Williams, one of the best players I saw all year. They had a terrific offensive line, big, strong, physical. And, you know, that win over St. John's Prep is going to go down in history as one of the great wins in Needham history. So I was impressed with them. They had a great year. Just didn't beat Xaverian at the end, but it was a close game. Could have gone either way. But I was impressed with Needham. We knew coming into the season they'd be good, but I think they even so outlived expectations even a little bit. So I was impressed. I think everybody who watched that team was impressed with what they brought to the table. They lose a great senior class. I don't know if they're going to be able to replicate that. It'll be tough, but this is the type of team that sets the table for future ones. So I'm really happy to see what they were able to do, and it was just a great season for Needham football.
It was an outstanding season. I picked them to beat Xaverian. I was wrong on that one. Again, it could have went either way. Needham had the ball, with a couple minutes left there at the end of the game to go down and tie it or take the lead. So you couldn't really ask for much more out of a Division I championship game. Coach Kopsko did a great job. I think totally well-deserved that he was named the Patriots Coach of the Year. 3 Division I players on this team. Again, you just don't really see that hardly ever at public schools in Massachusetts. So it's the best year in program history, I would say. It's only their second Super Bowl appearance in first and 13 years. So I think this is the best team in school history. Again, you mentioned that win over St. John's Prep. That's the best win in program history. Great senior class, a very good season. I think they're pretty clearly a top 4 or top 5 team in the state here. I think what else can you say? It was a great year for this team. I think a lot of people rallied behind them because they were the public that kept going up against the private schools. So they earned a lot of fans throughout the state, I think, throughout their run here in November. And it was an unbelievable year for the Needham Rockets. And I think it was a true toss-up in my eyes anyway between Needham and our number 3 team, which we'll get to in a second.
All right. And without further ado, as we get closer to the end of our final top 25 poll for the 2025 season in Massachusetts, this is another spot where we had some disagreement here, fellas. The number 3 team in our poll, the King Philip Warriors, your Division II runner-up. They finished 12-1, losing to Catholic Memorial 39-21 last Thursday. Of course, the loss snapping the Warriors' 25-game winning streak. this is where the three of us ran into some disagreement. And I guess I'll start here and I'll pass the baton to you guys. I felt that they deserved to finish as the second best team in the state. You guys did make compelling arguments for Xaverian, though, who is the number 2 team in our state. So I'm giving that away. But I think for me, what's hard is the record, right? These guys finished 12-1, had a 25-game winning streak coming in. They've only lost once in the last 2 years. We jostled, we wrestled, we went back and forth with this one. Ultimately, you guys were in agreement. I was on the other side of things. 2-1, I lose, you win. State your case.
Well, I think, you can make a great case for KP. I think if it wasn't for what Xaverian accomplished, then KP would be number 2 easily. Now, you look at the 4 losses for Xaverian. Lost to CM by 3 points. That is the only team in Massachusetts to play them so tight, period. So that counts to me. It's a loss, but you also look in context, that's important. When Xaverian lost to St. John's Prep on Thanksgiving, it was kind of full go, but not, because I know Xaverian kept 3 or 4 guys out that would have made a bit of a difference. Would they have won? We don't know. We're not going to say. Springfield Central, they lost by 8 points to a very good team, another top 10 team. And who am I thinking? Oh, BC High, which is something that they turned around when they played them again. But more than any of that is this is a lot about accomplishment. And Xaverian won Division I. And I think Division I is, to me, it's the best bracket in all of New England. So them beating BC High in the state semifinal, then turning around and beating Needham in the state title game, that means a lot. So I wanted to reward them for accomplishing what they did. Now, could you make an argument for KP? Of course you can. But I just felt like this year, winning that D1 state title, especially after all that they lost, but winning that D1 state title was an impressive thing to me. And that's why I kind of leans. It wasn't like 100-0 decision for me. It was more like a 51-49. You can go either way with that. I acknowledge that. But I do feel like Xaverian, for winning Division I, beating the teams they beat, I was really impressed.
Yeah, I think you summed that up nicely, Adam. Xaverian, 4 losses is 4 losses, and it does look a bit strange when we get to when we get to that next slide, and you see a 9-4 team at number 2 in the state. But I think they certainly deserve it. You mentioned BC High, that loss in the regular season. They came back, avenged that loss on a neutral field in the postseason. They beat dominated a good Leominster team in the playoffs. Of course, beat Needham, who we have at number 4 in the poll here. So I just think those wins over BC High, those wins over Needham are stronger than any wins that King Philip had. And on the other side of it, Xaverian hung with CM. They got down big, but they ended up losing by 3 points, and they are the only team to play KP to play CM to a 1-score game in the state of Massachusetts. So ultimately, I think the resume ultimately slightly favors Xaverian in this case. But I will say that this was close to a toss-up. I definitely lean Xaverian here. I think it was close to a toss-up, but it's 2 years in a row that these programs, I think, that's the biggest debate that we've had on this poll. Last year we finished with KP number 1, Xaverian 2. I think we were the outliers there. I think everyone else had Xaverian 1, KP 2. So I think that just speaks to how good the 2 of these programs are, that we're having these debates here in the top 3 in consecutive years.
Yeah, no, and I think it's a valid conversation, and I think you both brought up great points. So without further ado, let's go to the next slide. And of course, you already know the cat's out of the bag. Here we go. Xaverian is the number 2 team in our final MIAA top 25 poll for the 2024 season. They were your Division I state champions, finishing 9-4, and that's just it for me. 4 losses. I can't do it, folks. I just can't. 4 losses. I get what you guys are saying. The accomplishments, the resume, all that stuff is good, and they did win. They're your Division I state champions, and I do think that, to your point, Adam, that does carry some weight. But the 4 losses for me just continues to be a sticking point. I know it's to 4 good schools. You make an argument about the CM game and it being what I think it was 40-37, but in the end, the 4 losses are a real sticking point for me.
Yeah. But I just wanted to say with Xaverian, I did not think that they would do that at the beginning of the season. Like, this is like another one of these teams that they're ranked high, but you're like, well, are they going to win D1? I didn't think so. They lost Henry Hasselbeck to UCLA. Good running backs, good receivers, good offensive linemen, and they just turned around. I'm not saying they're a Cinderella team or anything like that, but I was surprised by how well they played at points this year. Vincent Busa, the running back / linebacker / safety guy for Xaverian, had a tremendous year, an all-state type of year. And like Dave Shivigato, like I've talked about this kid a lot. I really feel like Dave Shivigato is one of the best players in the state. He's a safety. He's a wide receiver. He can play running back if you want him to. And scored that first touchdown for Xaverian in the state title game against Needham. Obviously, can't talk about them without their defensive ends, Micah Amity, Dominic Funk. I mean, some of these guys are coming back. I mean, preseason next year, Xaverian's going to be up there. They're going to be up there because they returned most of their offensive line. Will Wood at quarterback. What a year Will Wood had at quarterback. He was just, I mean, he was just a great player for them. So I was really impressed. I thought it was a great coaching job by Alfanaro to get his team all the way back to the second year in a row. And they'll be in the mix again next year for sure.
Yeah, I think Will Wood probably had the biggest shoes to fill of any incoming first-year starting quarterback in the state this year. Of course, we know about Henry Hasselbeck and what he was able to do last year. Will Wood, only a sophomore, stepped right in and was able to lead Xaverian back to a state championship. You mentioned Shivigato. They have 3 offensive linemen starters returning next year. Dominic Funk's returning next year. Christian McIntyre's returning next year. So in my opinion, they're at this point, they're way too early favorite to be the preseason #1 team in the state next year. So I think this coaching job by Alfanaro was impressive. They didn't look great at some points in the year, to be honest. And they had guys in and out of the lineup. Busa was in and out of the lineup. They got beat by 3 scores that first game against BC High. It wasn't really competitive, and I didn't really know what to make of this team. But they ended up, getting hot and playing good football when it mattered. Micah Amity's arguably the best defensive player in the state, and Xaverian was able to come out on top again in Division I.
Yeah, and I think you bring up a good point about next year in terms of way early projections. If they're not 1, they'll certainly be 2. And finally, of course, the #1 team in our final MIAA top 25 poll for the 2024 season, Catholic Memorial, finishing 12-1, your Division II state champions. After opening the season with a loss to Cardinal Hayes, the Knights rattled off 12 in a row, and they capped it off with a D2 state title win over KP. Look, after losing to Marshfield last year and losing to Cardinal Hayes early, we really didn't know what to make of this team. They'll tell you that they thought they were going to be good, but they didn't look it early. But after that Cardinal Hayes game, they just went on a run. That St. Francis game ends up getting canceled, but as soon as they got into state play and Catholic Conference play, they were clearly the best team in the state, and they proved it on the field, and they deserve this #1 ranking.
They do, and I think it's probably the 3rd or 4th time they've been #1 here because I don't know if there was a COVID poll, but
you would have done it, so you would know.
Yeah, I know. Team said,
jog your memory, Adam.
Teams had 3-1 records in the top 5, right? But no, I mean, there's no debates here. Wait a minute, not to cut you off. Isn't that the year that DiBiaso proclaimed
that they're the best team in the state at the end of that fall 2 season.
I think so.
After they beat Zavarian, he went on some rant about how they're the best team in the state, and
Something like that.
he called all of us out for it. And I'm like, dude, it's the fall 2 season. Like, relax.
It's funny, but look, I mean, there's no debate about number one this year. There was a debate about what number one last year. There was no debate this year. CM was the best team. Again, they lost to that New York team. I think that might have helped them a little bit because it shows you, what it takes to win at a high level when you play a team like that. And they really didn't have many close games at all. And I thought this was really a year where you look at the kid Makai Dodd and you said this guy is a true player here. He was awesome, like all year. Nobody really shut him down. And so it's a great season. And again, I know they lose Dodd, they lose some other players. They're going to be right back in the mix next year. They have enough coming back to win it. They have enough coming back to be number one again. And so it was, just a dominant effort and, another state title for John DiBiase.
Yeah, like you said, Adam, no debate this year. Last year, we just talked about this. We debated King Philip and Zavarian in that number one spot last year. No doubt about it this year. CM clearly head and shoulders above the competition. By far the best team in Massachusetts. Makai Dodd's a special player. I'm happy that Bill O'Brien was able to, kind of keep him in state here. I think that's important that he honored that commitment. He's staying with BC. He's one special player. But they have 3 more BC commits coming back next year. Marcelino, Antunes, Mac Fitzgerald, and Jackson Tucker. So they have 3 BC commits going into next season. Flannery's back. Isaiah Falbus is back. Caleb Garrity's back. Jaden Johnson's back. So don't feel too bad for John DiBiase on the Knights. They have plenty returning next year, and they're certainly be in that mix with Zavarian and some other teams as that preseason favorite to be number one. But it was a dominant effort from start to finish, particularly against the in-state competition for CM this year. And they really could have ran the table. They were close in that Cardinal Hayes game. They got up early, let it slip away late, but they were, by far the best team in the state this year.
And don't forget Ramar Thomas as one of these next guys from CM as a quarterback, wide receiver, running back, defensive back. Just put him anywhere on the field, he'll make plays. That's the guy teams are going to be game planning for next year. He's a very good player.
Yeah, I think that's true. Ramar Thomas and Isaiah Simmons are the guys to watch next year for in terms of taking a bigger leap in accounting for more of that production offensively.
Yeah, and Coach DiBiase did say after the game that his phone number is out there and it's available. So hopefully, his phone rings this off season and he gets some competition. It would be nice. I mean, again, it started. That the conversation. We've had this conversation a lot in recent years. Given their level of dominance, should they be D1? It appears they're going to be D2 again. In their defense, they are moving up. I think that they were originally slated to be D3 next year, and they are moving up to 2 in the realignment. But a lot of people believe that they should be playing up in Division 1. Well, in fairness to them, they only have about 420 kids in the school. So if you're going to look at it from an enrollment number standpoint, then they could very easily be D4. So I think it'll be an interesting conversation this offseason. I'd like to see them challenge themselves a little bit more here in the Northeast. You don't have to go down to Florida. Cardinal Hayes is a nice game. St. Francis ended up forfeiting last year, but I'd like to see them maybe go down to Jersey or have somebody from Jersey come up here. I think, and you said this, Adam, and I think it's so true that, you spoke to coaches that believe that they can hang with those schools in the area, and I think they can too. I would love to see them play those schools. I think it'd be good for New England football to prove that it can be in the same conversation as some of those parochial schools in New Jersey. Certainly playing Cardinal Hayes helps. I hope they keep that. I hope they go out there next year. That would be nice. But I'd like to see them maybe challenge themselves a little bit more again here out of state, because I think that right now they are not only the best team in Massachusetts, they're the best team in New England. And I don't think anybody's going to argue that. I think when you stack them up to these other states, I don't know about you guys, I can't think of a program in this region, in any of the other states, that is as good as them.
No, they set the pace right now. They set the tone. Like that's you can't be this good and then shy away from that, you know. So, and I think he's starting to see the value in it for his team when they play one of those games to start the season. It's automatically you're right into it, and it's better than beating a team 48-0. So hopefully one of those games happens. It would be great, but I think teams. I mean, I think teams are starting to recognize what they're capable of and will want to play them. So any of those New York Catholics, any of those New Jersey Catholics, Pennsylvania, wherever you want to go, those things can be really. It would be really fun to watch.
Yeah, they would. I hope they, I hope they challenge themselves. I'm totally cool with Cardinal Hayes and St. Francis. Like if they ran it back with those two teams, even the Leominster game, I was fine with. That's a Division I playoff team in Massachusetts. And this is, this is meant as like a shot or disrespect or anything, but like the New Bedford game, just like that can't be on the schedule again next year. It's going to be a more challenging opponent. CM knows how good they are. They've won 3 state championships for 4 years now. Coach DiBiase continues to add to that legacy. Now let's see them play maybe a team from out of state, play Springfield Central maybe, a team in state. They don't even have to leave the state for that one. Play a team like that.
Yeah, because, I mean, again, look, we could say, well, they played Hendrick and they played LaSalle, and kudos to those programs for wanting to play them, but they proved over a 2-year span that they were head and shoulders above those programs. I think, listen, we all know the greatness of Coach DiBiase, and we all know what he's done at every program he's coached at. As you guys mentioned earlier, other than Mike Ross, only coach in state history to win 3 separate titles in 3 separate schools. But let's not talk about, for me, it's one thing to say after winning a state title, my phone line is always available. Great. Then when a school calls you to play. Because I think it's good for Massachusetts high school football. Because clearly you're ruling the roost around here. Now let's see if you can do it against some of these other programs. So nonetheless, congratulations to Catholic Memorial on another fantastic season. That's 3 titles in 4 years for Coach DiBiase. Truly a living legend. That is now 16 state titles for Coach Dib. It's hard to believe that someone can have that much success, but he is, if not the best to ever do it, certainly one of the best to ever do it. And again, congratulations to the Knights. And like you guys said, they're going to have another really good team back next year. And it could be a lot of fun to watch next year. Certainly from a schematical standpoint, dare I say, we could see Air DiBiase. Speaking of legendary coaches, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you thoughts on Bill Belichick taking over North Carolina.
I don't get it.
Who had that on their bingo card?
Well, I mean, it doesn't make any sense to me. I would think if he wanted to coach college, he could, coach at one that's got like a little bit more success. I don't know what maybe he was that desperate to find a job, but it'll be fun. Like that's the thing. It'll be really fun to watch to see how he does. And I just never imagined Bill Belichick in some kid 17-year-old's living room trying to tell them why they want to come to Chapel Hill. It's just so funny.
Well, but I think those days are over, though. I know a lot of people keep throwing that out there. Coaches don't go into living rooms anymore, particularly the head coaches don't. But, coordinators and position coaches do. But head coaches aren't really making the living room pitch anymore. I think that's a thing of the past. I don't think that he's going to go in there with his monotone voice and be like, yeah, we really want you to come to North Carolina. I don't think that's going to happen. I think he looks at the lay of the land, and in his eyes, he thinks it's like the NFL now. That if you have NIL money to play with, that's like having a salary cap, and that's like allocating contracts to specific types of players and building a roster accordingly. I think he's looking at college football now, and he's saying to himself, I'm going to treat this like I'm coaching an NFL team. And I think that's what appealed to him. I thought North Carolina was a bit much with the whole welcome back home coach. He lived there for 2 years. Relax. I mean, they act like he grew up with straw in his mouth, and he wore, the Huckleberry Finn outfit, and he paddled on rivers. He lived there for 2 years. Calm down. Amaral?
I mean, but it was last Wednesday, right? Wednesday or Thursday? Because I remember being at Gillette.
It broke, yes.
Yeah, I remember being at Gillette that, talking about it. I didn't think there was any chance of it happening.
No, me neither, to be honest with you.
I didn't think there was any chance of it happening, but I think it just goes to show that there probably wasn't much interest in him NFL-wide.
I agree. I don't think people are talking about that enough. I just don't think the interest was there, and I think he knew that.
I think so, and I think he just loves football so much. It's his entire life that he just wants to get back into coaching, and he's going to North Carolina. So I think that's just very strange, like kicking Matt Brown to the curb just to hire another guy in his 70s is like just kind of a little weird to me.
Yeah.
So I don't know. My main question here is we know about the North Carolina lacrosse program. How many lax bros can he turn into receivers like Chris Hogan?
Yeah.
Well, that's a very good question. I mean, as of right now, he's not going to be facing old friend Bill O'Brien anytime soon. I'm just looking at the schedules here. Unless I missed it.
I think Stone had it up. Let's pull up Stone's Twitter.
They're not scheduled to play again until 2028. So by then it could be the Steve Belichick show.
And that's another thing too, is what's this coaching staff going to look like? Is it just going to be all of
It's going to be Patriot South. Patricia's rumored to already be going with him. I don't know if McDaniels goes as his OC. His kid will be the DC. I'm sure his other kid will leave the Patriots at season's end and join him there, if not before that.
Yeah, Mike Lombardi's already his GM. That's already
he's already his GM, right? He was his PR director before that, but
yeah. Yeah, tell me about it.
Yeah, so I don't know how it's going to work. I think, from a football standpoint, I think this is proof, and I've said this for years about the North Carolina football program, that North Carolina wants to be good at football. They don't just want to be viewed as a basketball school. I think they genuinely want to be good at football. They have wanted that for a long time. They've invested in the program. And I think this is another one of those investments for them. They want to be good in football. I just think, other than from a initial pop standpoint and a name cachet reputation standpoint, I don't know how this is going to play out. I just think, even though the college game closely mirrors the pro game now, I still think you're dealing with 18 to 22-year-olds. And I've always said this, and I've coached college football. You don't want your ability to keep a roof over your head or put food on your table to be dependent upon 18 to 22-year-olds. That's not a demographic that I want my livelihood to depend on. So, you know what? Excuse me. Well, congratulations to Coach Belichick, and we wish him the best of luck. And you know what? It's an outside-the-box move. But then again, Bill Belichick is an outside-the-box dude. Gentlemen, I want to say thank you. This is a fantastic show. I really enjoy doing this with you guys year in and year out. Again, as I said at the start of the show, a lot of debate goes into this. We don't just put it on the screen here and we talk about it. The three of us have been talking about this since last week. I mean, Adam is obsessed with this, and he started talking about our final top 25 poll while the games were going on last week. So it just goes to show you why I call him the GOAT, because he lives for this shit. So he loves it, and Adam 2.0, aka Tyler Amaral, he loves this stuff too. So it's a pleasure working with you guys. Always fun. Love working with you guys and covering high school football. You make it fun. You're not only great friends, but I think you're the two best in Massachusetts when it comes to covering high school football. And I know I'm fortunate to say this, that we're lucky to have you, and I'm lucky to call you friends and fellow football junkies. So let's do it again next season.
Let's do it again, huh?
All right. But of course, there is no off season here, because the three of us will be talking football probably tomorrow at some point.
Easily.
Thanks again, guys. Really appreciate it. Great stuff as always. That will do it for this year's edition of our final top 25 MIAA poll. For Adam Kirk and Tyler Amaral, I'm John Serenitas. We'll be back with you after the Patriots game on Sunday against the Arizona Cardinals for the Patriots Pulse post-game show, and next week for the New England football show. Until then, be happy, be safe, and as always,